There we go. All right. Yep, it's probably going to be another one because it's more brain melting Active Directory stuff, and this one's longer. Well, not long, but it's kind of long because it's detailed. So managing OUs and Active Directory accounts. So like yesterday, if you have questions, please, not longer. No, I don't hate you. I didn't create this. So just think of it as Microsoft hating you, because Microsoft hates everyone. Okay. Working with organizational units. So the benefits of using OUs. You can create familiar hierarchical structures based on an organizational chart to allow easy resource access, delegation of administrative authority, able to change OU structure easily. You can group users and computers for the purpose of assigning administrative and security policies, and you're able to hide AD objects for confidentiality or for security reasons. Okay, so here's an example. Remember us working with the CSM Tech stuff yesterday? This is a single level structure OU on the left, and then on the right, you'll see a multi-level. So you have the administrative. This is broken down like it's different departments: administrative, marketing, R&D, and operations. And then you can see how it breaks out from there. Most companies do multi-level OU structures unless they're really, really small. It's quite easy to do. That's the nice thing about these. And that if you have to restructure, like say this one on the left where you have administrative, marketing, R&D, say you have one section of those that gets taken over by another section, or you need to combine sections, you can just scoot those around, drag and drop them, and move them in to where you need to go. Now on the other one here,
how easy are they to mess up?
They're very easy to mess up if you don't pay attention. This is why I believe in actually most places I've worked, it's not just one person that does this. You usually have one person that's like the overall in charge, but then you'll have people that work in projects together so that you can check each other's work. And that's just kind of like, you know, how we've talked about peer review. In this situation, that's why when I do these, just to make sure I don't mess up, I do checklists just to make sure, like, okay, I'm going to create this multi-level OU in here, and this is how I want to organize it. I prefer, rather than doing things on the fly, that I have a checklist so that I can create them and move things around, whether it's in a table, in a Word document, an Excel spreadsheet, whatever, before you get in and mess with it, just because that way you can visualize it. At least I do better visually if I can see stuff moved around, and then I start, okay, no, you know what, when I put it down this way, it doesn't seem to work as well. And then you get a chance to kind of mess with it a little better than trying to go out and do it on a production system and do it that way. Any questions before I go on? Okay. OU delegation of control. So delegation of control, a person with higher security privileges assigns authority to a person of lesser security privileges to perform certain tasks. Commonly delegated tasks include create, delete, and manage user accounts, reset user passwords and force passwords change at next logon, read all user information, create, delete, and manage groups, modify membership of a group, manage group policy links, generate resultant set of policies for planning, generate resultant set of policies for logging. Custom tasks can be created for delegation as well, but you must fully understand the nature of objects, permissions, and permission inheritance. By default, the OU's properties don't show that another user has been delegated control. To verify who has been delegated control of an OU, you must view the OU's permissions. It's not hard. It's one of those right-click view permission type things. Active Directory object permissions. There are 3 types of security principals that can be assigned permission to an object. You have user groups and computers. So you remember me talking about when you go into the MMC, you have the different ones there. That's what they're talking about. AD object security settings are composed of 3 components, collectively referred to as the object's security descriptor, discretionary access control list, or DACL, the object owner, or system access control list. Each object has a list of standard permissions and a list of special permissions. Each permission can be set to allow or deny, and 5 standard permissions are available for most objects. You have read, write, create all child objects, delete all child objects, and full control. Now, you don't want to give full control to just anyone. And I'll repeat that. You don't want to give full control to just anyone. That is something that you only want to give out sparingly, because I saw what happened when you gave full control to people who don't know what they're doing. And I had to restore a whole bunch of files because of that. And it goes very wrong very quickly. Permission inheritance in OUs. Permission inheritance defines how permissions are transmitted from parent object to child objects. All objects in Active Directory are child objects of the domain. By default, permissions applied to the parent OU with the delegation of control wizard are inherited by all child objects of that OU. That is something I suggest you try to remember. I've seen a lot of questions on that. They ask, how are permissions inherited? And this is exactly what you're going to answer. They are inherited. They are applied to parent objects with parent OU within the delegation control wizard, and they are inherited by child objects. Advanced features option in Active Directory users and computers. Default settings in AD user and computers hide some system folders and advanced features, but you can display them by enabling advanced features options from the view menu. Afterwards, you see the 5 new folders, which are lost and found, program data, system, NTDS quotas, and TPM or trusted platform module devices. Properties dialog box of domain folder and OU objects will now have 3 new tabs. Object, used to view detailed information about a container object. Security, used to view and modify an object's permissions. And then there's the attribute editor, used to view and edit an object's attributes. So you can see here what they're talking about. You have the general, managed by, object, security, complex, attribute, editor, and then you have the advanced button there. And then you can see down here where it says permissions for domain admins, and you can see the little checklist that you have. Managing user accounts. User accounts have 2 main functions in AD. Provide a method for user authentication to the network, provide detailed information about a user. Windows machines, not part of a domain, store accounts in the Security Accounts Manager or SAM database on a local computer. User accounts created in AD are referred to as domain user accounts. These accounts can usually log on to any computer that's in the AD forest. So here's an example: domain user properties, local user properties. Notice there's a significant difference in the amounts of properties that you have there. The following guidelines apply to the built-in administrator account. Local administrator account has full access to all aspects of a computer, while domain administrator account has full access to all aspects of the domain. The domain administrator account and the forest root domain has full access to all aspects of the forest. Default administrator account should be renamed and given a strong password. So by that, they mean don't call it administrator or admin and give it an 8-character password. That's a really good way to get hit. Usually they have something that they create that's a specific username, and then they have like a massive password that's attached to it. Administrator account should only be used while performing administrative operations. Administrator account can be renamed or disabled, but remember this, you cannot delete it. So it's better to rename it or disable it. A lot of places that I've worked at, instead of disabling it, they rename it and they only use it for specific administrator operations. And there's a very small handful of people that even have access to it, usually maybe 2 or 3. Following, does someone have a question? Following guidelines apply to the built-in guest account. Guest account is disabled by default after install and must be enabled before it can be used for logon. Guest account can have a blank password. I will smack you if I find out anyone's doing this. Please don't. It should be renamed if it is to be used. Guest account has limited access to a computer or domain, but does have access to any resource for which the everyone group has permission. This is why a lot of times people just leave it disabled and then create other accounts that are more specific. Creating and modifying user accounts. When creating a user account in an AD domain, keep the following considerations in mind. User accounts must be unique throughout the domain. Account names aren't case sensitive and can be from 1 to 20 characters. You can use letters, numbers, and special characters with some exceptions. That's because when you're doing queries, there are some characters that when you use them in usernames, they don't go well. Develop a standard naming convention. By default, complex passwords are required and passwords are case sensitive. By default, only a logon name is required to create a user account. So, for example, as I'm sure you've noticed, when you guys have like your, let's just use CWI, when you have your email and things like that, you'll notice that mine is my full name, and I'm just lucky enough to have a name that doesn't have very many people that have it. So it's just Anna Cash. And luckily, because of the way mine's spelled, I haven't had numbers behind it. But if you're someone that has like John Smith or something like that, you'll see like J Smith 1, 2, 3, 4, you'll see things like that so that they have different account names. So
that was really bad like that in the Army. We had a couple of Smiths that Smiths, Jones, really basic names.
Oh, I bet.
And yeah, like they'd be like 37, and it was the way the Army, or at least ours worked, was it was first name, middle initial, last name, and they were still 37 with an active account.
Oh my gosh. See, that makes me kind of glad. There is another Anna Cash in Idaho, but it's spelled with 2 N's and she has a different middle initial. So that's why I use my middle initial on everything so I don't get mistaken. So yeah, you never know. That's why when it comes to these, and naming conventions are different. Like when I went to university or ISU, they did it backwards. It was Cash Ann, and they used, instead of the whole name, they did 4 and 4, and there were some really fantastically horrible names that came up for these account names. Like I had a friend whose name was Catherine Butterfield, and Buttcath was her username. So she was not amused. All right, when you use ADUC to add users, you must enter a value from the following attributes: full name, user login name. This is the pre-Windows 2000. Password and confirm password. There's 4 check boxes. User must change password at next logon, which usually, even when I'm doing like the power, the scripts, I add that one because a lot of times you'll have like your generic It's just easier to do a generic first-time password and then force them as soon as they log in to change their password. Then there's also the user can't change password, which is not a good idea. Password never expires, also not a good idea. And then the account is disabled, which can be used in case of all sorts of things, like when you're doing outboarding and things like that. So here's your example, password, confirm password, and there's your stuff down here. Disabling user accounts. Yes, you do need to know this too. Reasons you might want to disable a user account. The top one, user has left the company. The account is not ready to use. User goes on extended leave. Another one that is not often talked about, user is under investigation. And that is something that as security professionals, we need to be aware of, because you will often be in the middle of that if you're a security professional. There were a number of times that I was asked, I need you to disable this account immediately. And that wasn't this person's guilty or innocent. We just have to disable it while we go through this investigation, so they can't change anything, just in case. Aside from using ADDUC and ADAC to enable and disable accounts, you can use PowerShell commandlets, enable AD account, and then disable AD account, as well as the dsmod user command. Using user templates. Now, these are actually really cool. And if you're going to be doing a bunch of brand new accounts, it's a good idea to use this. A user account that's copied to create users with common attributes. Tips for creating user templates: create one template account for each department or OU. Disable the template account to eliminate security risks. And that's usually what we did. We had one that said, and I don't remember the actual name, so I'm just using this as an example. So like faculty something template. And then, we tried to make them as descriptive as possible, and then dash template after it, so that we could see, oh, we just copy this, and then we can do that. Add an underscore or other special character to the beginning of the template account's name to make it easier to recognize. Doing the underscore is the most common method that I've seen, just because it's really easy to search by. If you do like asterisk underscore, then okay, everything with that underscore is either a template, or I've seen them do that on service accounts too. And fill in as many common attributes as you can, so that after the account is created, less customizing is necessary. Modifying multiple users. Selecting multiple users using Control-click or Shift-click allows them all to be edited simultaneously. Make sure when you do this that you do not select people you don't mean to edit, because you can very easily edit the wrong people when you're doing mass edits. The following actions you can be performed: add to a group, disable account, enable account, move, send mail, cut, delete, or you can go into the properties. Understanding account properties. So common actions that might be necessary. And the most common thing that I had to do was resetting passwords. That was the number one thing. Even when I wasn't working for a help desk, I got asked to do this constantly. Overview window has a reset password checkbox. To reset password using PowerShell, enter a set AD account password login name -reset. To rename an account, right-click the account and click rename in the ADUC. To rename the account using PowerShell, enter rename AD object, distinguish name, new name. And now I'm going to make a little caveat on renaming the account. Depending on interdependencies between Active Directory and other things, you may not just have one screen you have to do this on. You may, because of the way that some of these Active Directory interdependencies work, it's possible that once you do this, you could break the dependencies unless you go in and check all of your stuff. I mean, it depends on how your domain works, and it depends on your naming conventions. So make sure before you rename an account, and I'm saying this from experience because I had to fix this from several people breaking it, make sure that you know what interdependencies you have before you rename an account. Move an account. Accounts AD objects can be moved with one of the following methods. You right-click the user and click move. That's actually the easiest way to do it. Right-click and then click cut. In ADUC, drag the user from one container to another, or you can use the move AD object commandlet in PowerShell. I suggest if you're going to move a whole ton of people, PowerShell commandlet is actually better because it's just faster to do some of these in script form. But if you're only going to do one or two of them, doing the right-click move is quite easy. The General tab contains descriptive information about the account, but does not affect the user account's login, group membership rights, or permissions. Fields worth mentioning: display name, same as the CN where account is first created. Email can be used to send an email to the user using the default mail application. Web page can contain a URL that allows you to open specific URL by right-clicking the user account. That one was not used very often, at least in the small to medium businesses I worked with. The account tab contains information that most affects a user's logon to the domain. This one, it's the best to know what is in here within your organization. You have user logon name and user, there's two different ones, and how those are entered will affect how things talk to each other. You have one that's like for everything, and then there's one that's basically for legacy systems. It's best to have them both because even though you may think, oh, that's never going to happen, you don't know. Log on hours, log on to, unlock account, account options. This is like the store password using reversible encryption, smart card required for interactive logon, account is sensitive and cannot be delegated. And then you also have a section that says when the account expires. So here's your example. So you see this user logon name on the top. That's your one that you would use for like the current things. But then the one on the bottom, that's your legacy systems that I'd like to say is not used, but I've seen it in use more places than I care to admit. So make sure that it is formatted just in case. So here's an example of what the logon hours looks like. Profile tab, used to specify a location of files that make up a user's profile, logon script, and the location of a home folder. Profile path is used to specify the path of a user's profile. Logon script is used to specify a script that runs when the user logs on. Local path, used to specify the path to a user's home folder, like their documents folder. And connect is used to map a drive letter to a network share that's the user's home folder. So one of the most common problems that I ran into on this that I had to fix was that user profile path. And that's why I said when you were talking about renaming things, if you don't, we ran into problems where we found out that someone wasn't renaming the profile path and they had renamed the username. And it's kind of hard when you have the renamed profile or when you have the renamed username, but there's nowhere for it to find the renamed profile. It was a mess. So we had to do recreate things on the share and the renamed profile path. So like I said, make sure you have all of the little places where you might find that username before you change anything. Member of tab, this one's actually incredibly useful. Lists groups the user belongs to, can be used to change group membership. Set primary group button is needed only when a user is logged on to a Mac OS, Unix, or Linux client computer. So unless you're, for most Windows-based stuff, you're not going to use that. Using contacts and distribution groups. A contact is an Active Directory object that usually represents a person for informational purposes only. Most common use of a contact is for integration into Microsoft Exchange's address book. A distribution group is created in the same way as a group. A distribution group is used with Microsoft Exchange to send emails, but to several people at once. I've seen, it just depends on if they're using, what type of mail program they're using, and on this particular thing. Managing group accounts, Active Directory group objects are the main security principal administrators used to grant rights and permissions to users. Groups are easier to manage. Users with similar access requirements to resources can be made members of a group. When a group is created in ADUC, aside from assigning a name, there are two other settings. You have group type and group scope. Group types, there are two group types. There's security and distribution. A distribution group is used to group users together, mainly for sending emails to several people at once with an AD integrated email application like Microsoft Exchange. Can have the following objects as members: user accounts, contacts, other distribution groups, security groups, or computers. Security groups are the main AD object administrators use to manage network resources, access, and grant rights to users. Can contain the same types of objects as distribution groups. If a contact is part of a security group that is assigned permission to a resource, the contact does not make use of the permissions because a contact is not a security principal. Converting group type. Group type can be changed from security to distribution and vice versa. Only security groups can be added to the DACL. If a security group is converted to a distribution group, the entry will remain in DACL, but it has no effect on access to the resource. Converting group types is not commonly done. Usually a distribution group is converted to a security group. So usually it's not the other way around. And a lot of times, instead of converting them, they just make something new because they don't want to mess up stuff. Group scope. Group scope determines the reach of a group's application in a domain or a forest. 3 group scope options are possible in Windows Forest: domain, local, global, and universal. A 4th scope called local applies only to groups created in the SAM database of a member computer or a standalone computer. So here's your example. So group scope, possible members, can be a member of, permissions, and right assignments. So domain local, user accounts, computer accounts, global groups from any domain in the forest, and universal groups. Other domain local groups from the same domain, user accounts, computer accounts, global groups, and universal groups from trusted domains in another forest. Can be a member of domain local groups in the same group, local groups on domain member computers, domain local groups in the built-in folder can be members only of other domain local groups. Permissions and right assignments resources on any DC, which is domain controller, or member computer in the domain local groups in the built-in folder can be added to DACL only on DCs, not on member computers. And there's global. User accounts, computer accounts, and other global groups in the same domain. And then they can be a member of global groups in the same domain and universal groups, domain local groups, or local groups on member computers in any domain in the forest or trusted domains in another forest. Permissions and right assignments, resources on any DC or member computer in any domain in the forest or trusted domains in another forest. And then next, universal. So remember, there's global and universal. User accounts, computer accounts, global groups from any domain in the forest, and other universal groups. Can be a member of universal groups from any domain in the forest, domain local groups or local groups on member computers in any domain in the forest or trusted domains in another forest. Permission and rights assignments, resources on any DC or member computer in any domain in the forest or trusted domains in another forest. The way I like to look at this is kind of like reverse pyramid kind of thing. But that's just how I visualize it. This is one of those that you can always just save this particular slide to look back on later. Domain local groups. A domain local group is the main security principle recommended for assigning rights and permissions to domain resources. In a single domain environment, or when users from only one domain are assigned access to a resource, use AGDLP. Accounts are made members of global groups, which are made members of domain local groups, which are assigned permissions to resources. So this is one of those, can put music to it or whatever to remember it. And then in multi-domain environments, where users are from different domains are assigned access to resources, AGGUDLP. And I would, on these, when they're longer, I make up silly words or sayings, and that's how I remember them. Accounts are made members of global groups, which when necessary are nested in other global groups, which are made members of universal groups, which are then made members of domain local groups, which are assigned permissions to resources. And I'm sure that if you go look on YouTube or somewhere, somewhere it's got someone has a silly rhyme to go with this that'll probably stick in your head, just like the periodic table song or something like that. Global groups. A global group is used mainly to group users from the same domain with similar access or rights requirement. Considered global because it can be made a member of a domain local group in any domain in the forest or trusted domains in other forests. A common use is creating a global group for each department, location, or both. In a single domain environment, global groups are added to a domain local group for assigning resource permissions. In multi-domain environments where departments are represented in more than one domain, departmental global groups from each domain can be aggregated into a universal group, which is then made a member of a domain local group for resource access. So after all that crud ton of words, here's a nice graphic using global and universal groups. So you have your universal group and then you have your global groups. So just remember the universe is bigger than the globe. And so you have your big universe and then you have your global ones down here. A universal group can contain users from any domain in the forest and be assigned permission to resources in any domain in the forest. Universal groups can be a member of other universal groups or domain local groups from any domain in the forest. Universal groups membership information is stored only on global catalog servers. Universal group membership caching is a feature enabled on a domain controller that causes it to keep a local copy of universal group membership after querying a global catalog server. Universal group membership changes require replication to all global catalog servers. So if you change something in that big top pyramid, all the other ones that are in the sub pyramids have to be changed too. Plan your AD group design carefully so that changes to universal group do not happen often. Local groups. A local group is created when the local SAM database on a member server or workstation or a standalone computer is created, when a computer joins a domain, Windows changes the membership of two local groups automatically. The administrators and users. Administrators, domain admins global group is made a member, and users, domain users global group is made a member. Local groups can have the following account types as members, local user accounts, domain user accounts and computer accounts from any domain in the forest, domain local groups from the same domain, global or universal groups from any domain in the forest. Nesting groups, to throw you off further. Nesting groups, making a group of members in another group. Usually used to group users who have similar roles but work in different departments. The complexity of tracking and troubleshooting permissions increases as the numbers of levels of nested groups increases. Usually one level of nested groups of the same type is enough. So basically, they're trying to say, don't nest and nest and nest and nest, because the more you do, the more problems, the more troubleshooting and complexity issues you're going to have. So this is an example of a nested global group. You have your looks like super marketing, engineering, ops, and then you have your super all that they're nesting within. Converting group scope. Group scope can be converted with some restrictions. Universal to domain local, provided it's not a member of another universal group. Universal to global, provided no universal group is a member. Universal groups can't be members of global groups. Think about that, the pyramids that you had there. If you had them as part of global groups, it would just be incredibly confusing for everything. Global to universal, provided it's not a member of another global group. And then domain local to universal, provided no domain local group is a member. Default groups in Windows domain. Built-in folder, domain local groups used for assigning rights and permissions in the local folder. User folder, combination of domain local, global, and in the forest root domain universal scope. User accounts are generally added to global and universal groups in this folder for assigning permissions and rights in the domain and forest. Special identity groups can be assigned permissions by adding them to resources DACLs. Membership is controlled dynamically by Windows and cannot be changed manually. Working with computer accounts. Now, remember, computer accounts are different than user accounts. Computer accounts are created in Active Directory when a client computer becomes a member of a domain. A computer account is a security principal with an SID and password that must authenticate to the domain. Advantages of having users log on to computers that are domain members are single sign-on, Active Directory search, group policies, and remote management. Creating computer accounts. Computer accounts are created in AD in two ways. A user changes the computer membership from work group to domain in the system properties dialog box. So do you remember me talking about yesterday with the pain in the rump that was trust relationship issues, how you would have to change it to a work group, restart, and then tell it, okay, now you got to go into this domain and change it. That's what I was talking about. So you can change it from a work group and vice versa. And if you change it from a work group to the domain, joining the domain, you automatically create an account. Or you have an administrator creates the account manually in Active Directory. Usually computer accounts are created when your computer joins the domain. It's just faster and easier. This is that screen. And then you have the default domain down here. Changing default computer account location. Computers folder can't have a group policy linked to it. You should move computer accounts to an OU you have created. Change the default location by using redircmpexe command line program. Example, to change the location for computer accounts to the member computers OU in the CSM Tech local domain. Redir CMP OU member computers DC CSM DC local. So I don't know if you know that DC means directory change. Joining a domain. On the computer joining the domain, go to the computer name tab in the system properties dialog box. Click change, then click the domain option button. Type the name of the domain you want to join. You'll be prompted for credentials. The computer will restart. The biggest part of joining a domain is be prepared to restart a couple times if you have to. If the computer account does not already exist, it's created automatically as long as the domain user account has the right to add workstation to the domain. To join a domain using command line, you have your netdom join computer name, domain name, user, password, and then use asterisks instead of specifying passwords so the users are prompted for a password. And then PowerShell, add computer domain name, restart. Performing an offline domain join. Offline domain join is a feature that allows a running computer or offline virtual disk to join a domain without contacting a domain controller. This is useful for large deployments of virtual machines or mobile device deployments where network connectivity might not be available when the VM or device is deployed. Offline domain joins can be done when regular domain joins can't be performed reliably. To perform an offline join, use the DJ or djoin exe command. There are two phases, and the first phase is djoin provision, domain name, machine, computer name, save file, file name, txt. Second phase, djoin request odj, load file, file name, and then Windows path. And then you have your system root, and then local OS. All right. I know this is a lot. I'm sorry, guys. And like I've said multiple times, I don't expect you to remember every single little thing. We're just running through this so you can get a little overview, get your feet wet, get things, see how things are done. And then you can run back and watch the video again, or you can look at the slides and refresh yourself. It may be necessary to reset a computer account. There is no may, you will eventually have to do this. If the computer account has become unsynchronized with the domain controller, to reset, right-click the computer to object to ADUC and click reset account. Computer will leave the domain and join again. Administrators might also want to run the computer management MMC to remotely on a member computer. Right-click the computer object and click manage. Disabling computer accounts. When a computer leaves the domain, its computer account is disabled automatically. You might need to disable a computer account manually if the computer won't be in contact with the domain controller for an extended period. To disable, right-click the computer object in ADUC or ADAC and choose Disable from the shortcut menu. Yeah, I wouldn't fail. That means you lose out on the entire program. Don't do that to yourself. You guys are more than halfway through. And the most interesting classes, in my opinion, are the ones that you get next semester because, and this one has a lot of dry stuff. I am sorry about that. There's no fun and exciting way to do this one. However, next semester you get computer forensics, ethical hacking, and programming for security, which are, in my opinion, the three most exciting classes, I think. 255 and 257 are really my two favorites, which are the ethical hacking and computer forensics. And then you have your capstone project in the summer, which is not run at all like any other stuff. I think you guys will enjoy how that's done. So it's not at all like the other summer class. Don't worry, I'm never going to let them do that again. So you don't have to worry about that. Yeah, so, oh no, don't worry about the capstone program. I know a lot of people are terrified of it because you hear capstone and you think of things like what I went through when I did my master's capstone. And I had a 60-page project that I did for that. That is not what you guys have to do. And the capstone project is a group project. So you guys work in groups for it and you choose your groups. So I think because there are so many things that you can do, like the last group that I had, we had one group that had like the Wi-Fi pineapple they did a project on. We had one group that was able to work with one of the students. Their employer was willing to let them do a full-on penetration testing project. And that was really cool. And then the other group did a because they had multiple people in the group. So it really just depends on how you want to break your groups up. But the other group, they did Wi-Fi hacking, like how to different things on how to. They had the Wi-Fi coconut, and they did different ways to hack a Wi-Fi home network, and that was what their project was. It was all really cool. So there's a ton. Oh, 60 pages. That was not you guys. That is what I had to do for my master's capstone, and it was not a group project. Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you. No, you guys, it's not like that.
The irony is that you talk about capstones, and for some reason my brain just keeps picturing gravestones.
Yeah, no, don't think of that. I think that the capstones they have you guys do are actually a lot of fun. And there are some example ones that I'll give you next semester when you guys start. I need to talk to the group that did the penetration testing one and see if they'll let me release a sanitized version of their report so you guys can see it, because it was really cool. And you'll do a video presentation, which you'll do as a class, just so you guys we can all share and talk to each other about the cool things that we did. Because that was the biggest thing, is everyone wanted to talk about, oh, wow, you did what? How did you do that? There was a PowerPoint type thing, and then there's a written report. That's what you do on the capstones. But I will go through all of that later, and we're kind of getting off topic here. So let's finish with this. Because this one's, I think we're more than halfway through on this one. Yep, we are. Disabling computer accounts. When computer leaves the domain, its computer account is disabled automatically. You might need to disable a computer account manually if the computer won't be in contact with the domain controller for an extended period. To disable, right-click the computer object in ADUC or ADAC and choose Disable from the shortcut menu. Automating account management. When many accounts require action or certain tasks must be repeated many times, a command line program is efficient. A lot of times using command lines and batch files are common for a lot of these. Batch files can handle lengthy and cumbersome command line syntax. A batch file is a text file with the .bat extension. Batch files can take arguments to replace variables in the command. Bulk import-export programs can read an input file to create several AD objects at once, or produce an output file from AD objects. If you're doing, like, for example, because we did student accounts, every year we had new ones. So we had to disable every year, like senior accounts, and then we had new ones. So we had massive batch import export type stuff that we had to do, and these were much easier when we were doing that. Yeah, so C technically does get you through, and I have had several classes where I was like, you know what, C is as good as it's going to get, because my brain just melted and dribbled out of my ear. I will not fault you guys if you get a C. However, you guys have all been doing very well on your tests, so I think you're just scaring yourself because this is very, very wordy. And the summer classes were just brutal because of the way that they were put in. I was very upset about the way that you guys were put through that, so I vetoed those, and you don't have to worry. Those are never going to come around. So, all right, next. Command line tools for managing Active Directory objects. So these are the most commonly used command line tools: dsadd, dsget, dsmod, dsmove, dsquery, dsrm. So as you can get, it's add. You can suspect it's add, get, modify, move, query, and remove. Those are. Typing a /question after the command will show help information and command syntax. So that's like what we were doing in Linux with the -h, it's /?. And remember that. Yeah, no, it's kind of like the don't talk about Fight Club, don't talk about summer classes. I'm kind of there with you. dsadd syntax, object type, object dn, and then you have your options. Object type is the type of object you want to create. Object dn is the object distinguish name. So you have your common name. You can repeat it if the object is a folder or OU or organizational unit or like your domain component. Okay, piping output. This is really important. I know a lot of people don't understand this. Command line programs allow piping of output from one command to another via that thing right there, which is called a pipe. You can use piping with the dsquery and dsmod commands. A common use of piping is sending the output of any command producing more than one screen of information to the more command. So dsmod user question mark, and then you have pipe more, and that is an example of what to see. Oh, I know there is an incredibly inappropriate joke there. Yes, keep it to yourself. Bulk import and export with CSVDE and IDIFDE. So these commands can import and export Active Directory data in bulk. CSVDE uses the comma separated or CSV format, and you can only create objects in AD. IDIFDE uses LDAP directory interchange format or LDIF. It's not as common, but it's useful when you're working with LDAP applications, and you can create or modify objects in Active Directory. I'd like to say, no, you're not going to use that, but I was surprised at the amount of piddly little applications that got added on that only allowed LDAP support. So it's just good to know that it's out there. All right, so this is command. The following command creates a file called, I'm assuming they're trying to do marketusers.csv. So CSVDE-M-F, then there's your file, D, and then there's OUDC, blah, 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 blah. So, and I'm saying blah, 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 because that's just a lot there. This is one of your examples of your CN, your OU, your DC, and you can see what it's doing now. Whenever I do this type of thing on the notepad, I always format the view so that it wraps. It's just easier for you to see. This is to see the same output when you're doing the IDIFDE format. As you can see, it's just slightly different. Instead of putting everything out in a big line, it kind of goes down and put things in a little bit different format. Creating users with CSVDE. You can use regular text file to import users into AD with CSVDE. File has to be formatted correctly, and boy, do they mean that. Must have header record listing attributes of the object to be imported. An example of the header record, you can see right there. DN, SAM account, user, principal name, object class. Data record for this CSV file looks like, and this is just an example of what that looks like. LDIF format is considerably different from the CSV format. It's basically the same idea, it's just how you format. Instead of the header line followed by the data records, each object consists of several lines with each one specifying an action or attribute. So instead of having everything put out like this, you have to drop everything down below on each attribute. Okay, managing accounts with PowerShell, it's significantly easier than the other options that we were just shown. There are numerous PowerShell commandlets to manage AD accounts. To see the entire list of AD PowerShell commands, type the following PowerShell get commands module Active Directory. That's a good one for you guys to remember. Put that on your little list of helpful commands. When using PowerShell commands that might produce results you're not sure of, add the what if parameter to the command. Again, something else that's helpful. It's kind of like saying, so what if I do this? Am I going to break everything? So then it shows you what happens. And then it shows you the results of the command without actually performing it, which is why the what if command is your friend. Yeah, no, don't do delete sys32 but unless you put what if after it. Or format or drop, or there are so many ways that you can go wrong. Resetting passwords using PowerShell. To reset a user's password, you can see this here, set AD account password, and then you do identity, username, reset, give it the new password and everything else. To set user account, so the user has to change the password, set ID user, identity, username, change password at logon, and then you set it to true. Managing group membership. To add users to group, you can see here, that's what that is. All right. All right, we're through. Yay! We did it.
Was that both of them or just one?
That was just one.
Jesus.
No, that one was, let's see, 73 slides. And I think the next one is, hold on, let me look. 42. So
Has anyone got any Tide Pods? It's dinner time.
I do have an option for you guys, because the other one, let me go do a quick look through. There's a lot of graphics in the other one compared to this one. So either we can do that all tonight, although that last one was pretty brutal, or we can tack that on to the beginning of our lab time tomorrow, because it's fairly short. So if you guys,
I will never not be happy to put off something till tomorrow.
I was going to say tonight's was, I think, a little bit worse than last night's. So if you guys want to, yeah, I'm seeing a lot of let's do it tomorrow. Go on, let's do the short one tomorrow, right before we get into some work with the VMs. And mercy, nice German. Mercy, have mercy. So tomorrow is that, let's see which this one is. Let me look at the beginning of this one so I can tell you. Oh, this one's not as bad. It's user and service account configs. So yeah, it'll be, no, the recording has not stopped. So it'll be a little bit easier.